less than 700 people, 700 people to watch this.
Okay, awesome. Well, welcome back, everybody. I think the goal of this, Sarah, right? Or remind me if I'm, or tell me if I'm wrong, but was for folks to report out from their groups and kind of share, and then maybe at this point, at least in pencil, commit to sponsoring some of this stuff. Is that correct?
Yep, and the goal is to ideally get some dates on the calendar, which then we as staff can try to look at. When are we trying to get out back out of print publication? How is that going to work? Timing and promotion, and when we need to know details by.
Want me to go first?
Do it.
So I'm not sure we have any hard actual dates, but here's what we're kind of thinking about doing. Some kind of strategy for great gatherings in the neighborhood, kind of based on a couple different things. One is restaurants, who's here, who might host exclusive events. Number two is who are the people in the neighborhood that could provide value or an event or an exclusive that people might want to attend. Number three is, and if I could read my writing, number four, I can tell you, is the event-based. So like an experience-based thing, like it might be Fat Tire Bike or a nighttime bike tour or a cross-country ski event. And I wish I could read number three, and I can't. So that's great gatherings. We're going to work on that. I'm going to work with Becky when she's back in town and we're going to get out and meet some of our restaurateurs, figure out what kind of opportunities we have. Sarah talked about ambassadors at Empty Bowls. We're going to probably work on that piece ourselves and then ask for a donation. That will be supported by some kind of collateral, which I have a couple people in, at least one person in the neighborhood that might be able to help us develop some collateral either in print or online. Next is we're going to work on a fundraiser that's based on the block captains connections, kind of an old American Cancer Society strategy where the neighbor asks for money and support and explains what we do. Lastly, kind of commercial connection. So we're going to start with the new commercial buildings in town and ask those developers for support, and then work downward and look at who are the businesses and commercial property owners in the neighborhood and contact them, just like we did our own neighborhoods, and ask for the support. So that's kind of the short list I have. I'm not sure any of those fit in. We'll get some calendar stuff in place and move forward.
Awesome. That sounds great. Thanks. Does recruitment want to go next? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, we were just talking about the annual meeting and trying to pin down a date on that, but I think we have to put a pin in it for now, pending potential direction from the city on a possible uniform date for neighborhood annual meetings. And I think we'd be interested in hearing more about that before we committed to a firm date. But we did talk about, with the annual meeting this year, shooting for an in-person event and working on certain programming and food that would draw people to attend, kind of more like what we've done in the past in times before COVID. But yeah, I think there will be more to come on that. We're going to be working on it a lot here in the winter and spring. And I think we probably should aim to have a firm date, if at all possible, before Empty Bowls, so we can maybe have literature handed out with the soups and kind of make that maybe the kickoff to promoting the annual meeting. But yeah, that's kind of where we are.
Can I ask a question? Is the city proposing a specific date yet, or are they just proposing the concept of a combined date?
They have a date. I can't remember what it is, which is why I was digging through my email when we all came back here.
Okay.
It's in May.
Okay. but so it roughly aligns with the schedule we've kind of been going towards, right?
Yeah.
Ish. Okay. Okay. And then strategic planning. BJ, Katie, Josh.
I can, since I took notes, I can talk a little bit. Of the events, that strategic planning is a little bit challenging because we're not going to necessarily have an event surrounding that, but we talked about having engagement at Empty Bowls, the SAP Tap, as well as potentially the office opening, to have some sort of feedback given to us on what we come up with a new vision and a mission statement. And could strategic planning be at other events so that we could be getting feedback from neighbors at those events as well. We spent a lot of our time kind of planning our agenda for our next meeting, which is going to be on Friday. So we won't bore you with the details of that right now. But the other thing we came up with, and Sarah, LR, Kenzie mentioned that you were interested in this as well, is some sort of potential neighborhood scavenger hunt. We had talked about kind of how St. Paul has the medallion, and doing something like that with having clues in different places around the neighborhood, or different online places where we have a presence. So the Kingfield website, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and then having bonus clues of potentially at businesses in the neighborhood that we haven't engaged with, that neighbors would need to go to and see this great shop that maybe they've never been to in the neighborhood, or something like that. And those were our ideas that came out of this time.
Just as a side note, I think it was our last meeting Brighton was talking about. She and Sam had just organized a scavenger hunt, so.
Cool. Yeah, and that was one of the ideas. I really like that idea of kind of like this medallion hunt, like in a way to get people, especially if we do kind of the engaged, like put the stuff out via our different mediums, which we engage with the community, to get people into those spaces more, right? To get people to know that there's like, we have a Twitter, to get people on the website. And then we kind of even said that it might even be possible if we do that and we get more engagement there, to start sprinkling in some strategic planning questions, right? Once we have more people in those spaces. So yeah, I've just seen, I know that the St. Paul medallion hunt is coming up sometime. I think it happens in the winter, right? And so it'd be kind of neat if we were to hide one thing in the community and have somebody win, and it becomes kind of a central kind of point that folks can rally around and engage more with KFNA. So yeah, anything else anyone wanted to share on this, or any other questions you have, Sarah, or things that you wanted to get out of folks right now?
No, the biggest thing I'm looking to get out of folks are people excited about an event that they are working on planning.
Can I ask from the strategic planning perspective, our office opening? We mentioned that was kind of something that I think we were planning on doing pre-COVID, right?
We definitely had plans pre-COVID, so we've redone our office COVID policy. So the office is now open for those of you who want to meet in person, for small groups of vaccinated people with masks on. But so that's going to carry us at least through this next virus wave or till the spring. I'm hoping we can plan a spring opening with both organizations, spring or early summer.
Okay.
We just can't invite people like into the space yet.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So I guess maybe I would encourage folks, as I know strategic planning is meeting here this week, as folks meet more, I I think we'll hopefully, I guess my goal would be to come out of our meeting on, I think Friday that we have it, with some commitments from us in terms of like engagement with events and different things that we would want to hold. And then I'm guessing it sounds like it's the same for, fundraising and recruitment as well, especially around some of the stuff that, that Todd mentioned and also the annual meeting. So do we know when we have an answer, when we'll have an answer from the city, or more information is coming out around the annual meeting, Sarah?
So I know that they have a date. My concern is the last time I heard it was a day. And so knowing how things are at the city right now, I don't know that we'll get more specifics we were talking about the complications of having an entire election day when we need to take nominations from the floor. So when do you gather your meeting? When do you kick off elections? When do you have an event and tell people what you want them to hear at the annual meeting? If it happens over a
And
8-hour
I
period.
think we'll be able to manage that. I think we just want to know what the day is, and then
Yep.
we plan a time. So yeah, I think we can piggyback off the city and then just plan a time.
Yep, and I think we can do that. I mean, I don't think that we can sort of participate with them and sort of not, depending on how they're doing it. I would say, I guess a clarification for me from strategic planning is your group going to try to look at the current mission statement and redraft it in your group?
We on Friday need to actually like review what we have been able to do of the plan we put out for this year and what we haven't been able to do and revisit. Maybe, but I think like we're gonna now be proposing the next steps in the process based on what we did and didn't, what was and wasn't possible this year, basically.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess those next steps are something that I would like to see from strategic planning. And I guess would just like to emphasize that I think it's fine if your group takes the feedback. I think it's actually preferable to craft something and get feedback from the rest of the board and the community rather than trying to take a board meeting to do it. So.
Okay. Sounds good. Any other input or comments from board members or staff in regards to event stuff for 2022? None. I believe the next item on the agenda, and we are right on time, is, I believe, right, is procedure on position taking discussion. So Sarah, you put some really good information together in that reading. Maybe do you want to go over kind of the background on this? I can kind of just tee it up and say, I know this was a discussion, I believe, that was teed up at our last board meeting as well too. It's something that we've been talking about, and I think has been talked about in the community here. So Sarah, I guess, do you want to talk about some of the stuff that you put together, and then we can have a broader board conversation?
Yep, and maybe I can let me put the link in here. Can I just, without anyone calling out, well, okay, I'm going to call you out. How many of you have read this? Okay, so at least half of you, which is a good start. Okay, so I put this together based upon the last executive committee meeting and over some conversations we've been having where we got tangled up in policies and positions. And so just as a review, I think that we need, language matters. So we need to start being careful when we use the different words of policies, procedures, and positions. So the policies, many of which we've just put into the place, are the operational guidelines for KFNA. You guys set those policies, and they're backed by procedures for how what steps are taken to make sure that that policy is enacted correctly. Or so often they have to do with the workings of the organization. So how hiring is done, how finances are managed, what duties are of different people. Where I think we were getting tangled somewhat is we were often, we have been taking position statements on various issues outside of the organization and sometimes calling them policies, or maybe that was just in my brain. So I think really what the board wants to talk about is when does KFNA take a position statement and what does KFNA take a position statement regarding? And so I put together a sort of bullet list of sort of pros and cons of taking a position on a topic. The reasons why you would want to do it, because it's an issue that your organization cares deeply about. You're showing that your constituents or neighbors that you really care about it, hoping that they feel the same way so that they feel a greater affinity to KFNA. And also, I believe that KFNA has taken a position on certain topics because they feel like it can make a difference on that topic if by expressing that to neighbors. Neighbors are like, oh yeah, I trust the organization, I agree with that. The cons of it are possibly losing tax exempt status if it's done, I guess, if someone wants to fight it, or if it's done by spending too much money and it's construed as lobbying, which is what, whether right or wrong, was happening in the last issue. And also it can drive constituents away if they disagree with you. So just to reiterate, and this bottom part of this paper about can KFNA develop position statements is actually taken from the city guideline that was put together for this reason. And it says very clearly that neighborhood associations can take position statements and when they can and can't. So as we've talked about a bunch of times, it can't be for candidates. It can be on ballot initiatives. It can't exceed a certain dollar amount. And that's all NCR directed language in that entire section. And then I just put together a list of position statements that KFNA has taken in the past. They're in reverse order. So there's the most recent question 1, 2, 3 on the ballot, as long as the position about call for deep transformational change. There was a resolution about a position about a year ago, which was at that point called a resolution, about looking at policing and safety. There was one about the vote yes on the liquor licensing. There was one that I'd forgotten about digging through minutes about pedestrian and bike access in the city. And then there was the first one that I ever remember the board taking upon was a vote no campaign, the for marriage equality proposal. So I believe that was the information that the executive director was, or that the executive committee was looking for. I think the goal was to have people look at this, think about it, and launch into a conversation about how does KFNA define areas or topics where they might take a position. Are there things that the board can agree on based upon their mission statement? Or is everything sort of a spur of the moment? This is a hot issue. and it's a fist of five. Yeah, we do it. No, we don't. So sort of coming up with a procedure for how future boards can sort of wrestle with this and feel comfortable taking positions.
Thanks, Sarah. And so I think this kind of opens up the conversation. The one thing that I'll say is I've volunteered. This is something both on positions and on kind of generally board members bringing resolutions, whether they're for a KFNA to take a position or to do something, something that I've wanted to clarify in order to provide a clear path for board members to be able to bring things in front of the board and say, this is a position I would like to have the board take. This is something I would like to have the board do, and have that be very clearly laid out in what are the steps, what are the guidelines for that, how does that process happen? And so one of the things that I've kind of volunteered to do is why like I think it'd be great, really good get feedback here, or to work on those processes and procedures that the board has as kind of as guidelines for establishing these. If we are going to take a position on something, what are the expectations for engagement with the community? What are the expectations for that going out to the community? What are the expectations for, the board to review that, board discussions, all of that? We've been kind of making that up as we go a little bit, right? And I think hopefully people have been doing an adequate job at least at, but I would like to kind of have those discussions further so that we can kind of start cementing some of these procedures into place, so that folks feel more comfortable and understand what's going to come up when board members want to take positions in the future. So I guess with that said, is there any comments, questions? Thank you, Sarah. I see that you did put kind of some questions here in the agenda that I think are good ones to kind of facilitate a discussion. So I guess with that said, I'll leave it there and hope folks, kind of have some ideas or comments or things that we can discuss here.
Well, one thing I thought of, maybe a lesson learned from the last position statement vote. From my perspective, I think that, and I raised this question before the vote to a couple people, but I think there needs to be a consensus on what the role of the board is in political issues. I think this is true for any like elected official too, like someone in public service, but I think there's an argument you can make that people elect you because they trust your judgment, right? Or they elect you because they trust your positions. One or the other. I always like to say it's, and this is not really, we're not elected officials, so I don't know if that necessarily holds, but we do owe fiduciary duty to the members of the organization. The members are our neighbors, right? So our duty here is to safeguard the organization, to make sure that it continues for future generations, and that the services that we provide will persevere after all of us are no longer on the board, and we're stewards of the organization in that regard. So I think the question that I have for the board is it appropriate to wade into a hot button topic, a political issue, right? Where it appears that there's division in the community. There's an argument to be made, yes, we should take a position to, because that's we want to show leadership and so on and so forth. And then I think there's also an argument about, is it in the best interest of the organization, right, to take a position? Is it in the best interest of the organization to potentially alienate a portion of our constituency, our membership? And I think if you look at the past votes that we've had, I don't know if there's results for all of them, but my general understanding was everything that we'd ever done before was a strong majority, a super majority vote. And that's why I think it might make sense to adopt a policy that provides future boards with at least considerations, right? Something that we as a board, lessons we've learned, if any, from our votes on policies. Is there any knowledge that we can impart to future board members, rubrics for consideration, when it's appropriate for KFNA to take a position, when KFNA doesn't take positions, and I think that might be very helpful, and it might help answer some questions that future board members could have, because I know I certainly had questions about it. It was something that I was challenged with too. So that's all I'd say. But
I think David is right in the sense that it is an important question to answer to what the purpose of this organization is. If the purpose of the organization is to sustain itself, then that would lead to one set of decisions as to like how we approach issues like this. If the purpose of the organization is some sort of enrichment of our community, it might lead to a different set of questions about or decisions about how we approach questions like this. And then the sort of like the meta layer of this is like, do we have to agree about that purpose? I don't know that we do. And I think people who are elected to this body may say, this is why I want to be part of this board, and give their reasons. Others may have other reasons. And then we hash it out when we are all together raising our hands or giving thumbs down to certain things. Me personally, I will always be on the side of taking positions, because I just look at my role on this board. I look at the idealized role of this organization as enriching our community, and sometimes that means standing up for things that not everyone lands on the same side of, but trusting your values and trusting the values of the folks that elected you to the board, to say that this is a time for an organization to put a stake in the ground. And it's something that we've done not just last year, but many times in the past. Sometimes it breaks that it feels like there's a super majority who think the same way as the majority, and sometimes there isn't. But I don't necessarily think that is means something's broken. I think it just means that we're all bringing our own selves to the conversation, and we land where we land and we talk it out. I think the process that we went through for the past set of resolutions was a healthy one. I think there was a lot of robust discussion. I think that was all positive. And I think that is extremely healthy. So I think it's just sort of part of the messiness of sort of what we call democracy, I suppose, to be grand about it. But that's what I think.
I basically agree. I think with both of you, actually. Every decision we made should go back to what our mission is. And if our mission is to create a safe, welcoming community for everyone who lives here, then there are positions we should take, and sometimes they may be difficult. As someone who felt very personally attacked and not included in our state in 2012, when my life was on the ballot, I appreciated every organization that stood up for me. And I think that can be said for, I'm sure, for a lot of people in this last situation. And I think if that's our mission, and I think we all do think that's our mission, then we use our mission as our guide to decide when we make decisions. That said, I think it might be helpful to have some kind of supermajority so we don't take decisions that are decided by one vote. And call that a community decision, because I'm not sure, it can depend on who shows up. So I think being bold is just fine if it fits our mission. And but I think we should be thoughtful as we do it. And one way to handle that would be a supermajority, which we had this year. So that was not a problem at all. But
Yeah, I'd love to, I guess I'm have like a process question. I'd love to disaggregate. I think it is totally makes sense if we want to process and debrief the fact of our taking the position we took in this past election. And that seems like a different thing to do together than decide what we should do forever going forward. And I agree with each person who has spoken that should be entirely to do with our mission. And because we're doing a strategic planning process that could be about refreshing, clarifying, regrounding what the mission is, I am not sure we should make a decision right now about what our forever policy should be about taking positions before we've done that. And seems like a really helpful thing to name, that like a reason that we need to refresh a mission that hasn't been refreshed for a long time is because we live in new and different times. And that brings new and different things to a group like ours in a time where hyper local decision making has taken on a different meaning because of the pandemic, because of the uprisings, et cetera. I have no doubt that that's going to come out in the process that we continue to do in strategic planning. But I guess I just love to check, like, are we trying to move to making a decision on this, like how we feel about this, or / do we want to just sort of open up and acknowledge, like, I think it makes a lot of sense to want to do a little bit of debriefing and processing that we did make the decision we did. And I think we're all kind of doing both, but I just sort of wanted to ask that or flag that.
I'm going to agree with every person who agreed with every person. And just to kind of comment, with what Katie had just said, I think that's a really good point. And I think the point of this discussion is to not make any decisions, not to almost say, okay, yep, this is what we're going to do going forward. I'm really viewing this as like, how does the board feel about positions, right? And if what comes out of this discussion is like, yeah, we really want to focus on the mission, and then we want to see how KFNA's position taking, I don't even say policy, but process comes out of that mission. That's awesome. Like that's a great, I think, discussion and be a great thing to come out of this. I guess with that said, I guess I would ask board members, do we feel that having some ingrained, I know like the word rubric's been used, considerations have been used, process has been used, like, do we feel that those are valuable things for the board to establish when in consideration of taking a position? Should we have those things in place for when we look at positions in the future? I think that's even just like a foundational thing. Do we think that that's valuable? Would be a question that I would ask to everybody here.
I think, yes, I think we should have rubric considerations, procedure, practice of how we go about it. And I would add that I would want this to also include a communications plan of, after we've come to this decision, how is it being communicated out? I know, David, you had mentioned you wanted who was attached to the vote. Like, all of those things are great ideas that I think we should create a communication plan of where it's shared, how it's shared, how much is shared, who is it shared to, just so that it is all very, very transparent and laid out on how we are going about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would just add to, I might have missed this in the reading document that was shared, but I also think some, like the positions that are included in there are all board decisions, and we also have committees, and committees have taken positions on housing developments, transportation, bike ped projects, and things like that in the past. And so it might also be helpful to distinguish boards taking positions, committees taking positions, and if there are differences or how something gets decided to be brought forward from one group versus another.
And I guess if I can just add, the other thing that I think was interesting in what a lot of you were talking about is in talking about the mission, I heard a lot of different definitions of KFNA's mission. And so to me, that really does point out what Katie said is it needs to be looked at, and it needs to be rewritten, and it needs to be understood and agreed by all of you that are serving for KFNA. The most disturbing part, I think, of the process for me, and most of the comments were from outside the neighborhood, but to me, it's understanding your mission and then being able to explain it and tell other people what it is. So in that process, I heard over and over again, neighborhood associations can't do that. Their job is to build community. And the part that bothered me about that was not that is not every neighborhood association's mission. The part that bothered me about that was that by not taking a position and not talking about things, it was assumed that that's how you keep a community a community. And so to me, that's what screamed at me as a problem about this conversation, that no one was talking about. Like, as Jerome said, until people can sit down and talk about what they don't agree with and listen to what someone else's side is, we don't have a community. And that's not those weren't the arguments that were coming from the public about taking a position. It's just that they didn't like what the position was.
And I think that's in part true, but I do think there was a lot of people that took offense at the fact that KFNA took a position on a hot button political issue. I mean, I heard that very frequently. I think that was what I took away as the lion's share of the negative feedback that we received.
To Alice's point, did anyone take offense in 2012 when it was marriage amendments? And that was a very hot button topic in the state of Minnesota, maybe less so in Minneapolis, but it was a hot button topic. And I don't see a lot of people upset about that.
Yeah, and I think because of the fact that that was reflective broadly of the views of the community, you're not going to, because again, I think people look at, my question, I guess, is KFNA supposed to reflect the views of the community, the deeply held views? You might have two people here that disagree with, the vote no movement in 2012, maybe two in Kingfield, right? But it was broadly reflective of the views of the community. Whereas here it wasn't broadly reflective. And is that tension problematic for the organization? I think that's the question that I have. I don't know of any other votes in recent memory that have been as contentious on a local level as this election and the issues brought forward in this election. And I think the results, including the results within Kingfield, show that there was not a consensus either way. Period. There just wasn't. I would have been equally opposed to taking a position, the opposite positions, even though that was, somewhat congruent with my political beliefs, right? I just think that the question is, do we as a board, knowing that it might not agree with your political beliefs, do we as a board think it's appropriate for the board to wade into hot button political issues? And I walked away from that thinking that was I said, I mean, I honestly, I considered tendering my resignation after it because I was so frustrated. But I thought it was a mistake by the board, and I was, yeah, I thought it was a mistake, and I think that's something that should be considered. You know, it made people feel better, but I don't necessarily think that it was a smart move on the organization's part to wade into something that divides the community.
I'd like to
So
just be sure that it's reflected that it, as somebody who voted in support of our positions, it was not a choice that I participated in because of my feelings, but because of the consequences for our community and our city. And since this is a conversation about like surfacing what do we think should be a part of a future potential policy or directive or rubric, I don't think that something being hot button or controversial is a measure for whether it should be something a neighborhood organization engages with. I'm not sure how that could ever be made into a policy. And I think it just merits reflecting why the like emotional tenor of the conversation is the thing that bothered us, versus like the stakes that were on the ballot for our communities. And I do just want to note that while the two precincts were different, like our southern precinct of Kingfield did vote no, the overall total votes were the most people in the Kingfield neighborhood across the two precincts did vote yes on two.
So I do think it's appropriate for the organization to take positions on issues, even those that are hot button political issues, as the term is being used here. You know, I think our role is to advance the positions that we think are of benefit to the community. And I do think a part of that does involve gauging the temperature of the community, hearing feedback from the community and representing those views. But I don't think we can simply make those decisions based on whether we perceive there to be a consensus or not. I think that's a difficult standard to implement. For one, we would have to define like how much support constitutes a consensus. And then we would also have to guess whether a particular issue does or does not have that level of support in the community. Now, with all that said, I do think it is appropriate to make some more codification of how we go about forming policies. I think that some of the ideas about rubrics and about communication after the fact are good. It also seems to me it would be beneficial to, for issues that we feel are of great importance for the community. I think that's a more important standard than whether they're viewed as hot button, but we should have some sort of mechanism to do more outreach prior to the vote, to make sure community members are aware that this is happening, to make sure that they have their opportunity to have their voice heard by reaching out to board members through email or through speaking at the meetings. And then that gives us an opportunity to at least take those views into account and have a better sense when we have those discussions at the board meeting.
Yeah, I appreciate all these comments. Something that I think could be a further discussion as a board and is just exploring this notion of what is political and what is not, because I think what is political is different from person to person. And I think that some people's very existence is political. For example, people with a uterus, immigration status, religion, who you can marry. These things have all get deemed political, but they're about a person and their identity. And to me, I guess I see those more so as like a human issue. It's not a political party issue. And if we avoid, I guess, discussing, advocating for those types of more human impact situations, then we lose out on a huge part of what I see as neighborhood organizations, which is really to build community and work with community so that everyone can have a thriving and healthy and safe life here in the neighborhood and in the city. So I think that what I see as what went well with the last conversation and what I think is important as kind of the baseline, in addition to, being able to point back to our mission and things like that, is what is the process? We've talked about that. Did we have a healthy conversation as a board, and are we listening to one another? And how can we model that for the neighborhood? And then, if there are questions or issues from neighbors in terms of how a decision that the board made, just making sure that we are open and transparent and like open to having any of those conversations with talking folks through, like, this is our process and this is the conversation and here's why we made this decision. I think at the end of the day, if we can point back to those things, that says a lot about the integrity of the organization, which I hope that neighbors would recognize and kind of see the big picture of the integrity of the organization and how we work, rather than maybe one particular position that was taken on a certain topic. So I think that, I think that we're able to do that with this last position, and speaking to the other positions that we've taken too. And I think like these resources that we're talking about are great and will help strengthen the process even more so going forward.
Great. We are coming to close to time here when we were planning on wrapping this up, but I don't want to cut anyone off, or if there was anything else that anyone wanted to add to this discussion. I think that this is great. And I think there's been a lot of good feedback. So I guess I'm kind of proposing that what maybe comes out of this discussion is a summary of what we've talked about here, and then maybe even just a little bit of a roadmap, which I'm willing to kind of take a shot at on maybe what some of these steps are to establishing this, these kind of processes. And I think it starts with really getting our mission and vision in place, and then feeding the processes for some of this position taking out of there. So anything else anyone would like to add, or comments anyone has on position taking? Awesome. Okay, cool. And again, thank you. Just to highlight what Sarah just said, I think modeling these discussions for the community and showing how we can talk and engage in these ways, I think is super valuable. And I know, our board meetings and these, these videos aren't like the most watched things on the internet, but like, I hope that, and I have heard, right, that I've actually heard from neighbors that they went back, they watched our debate, they were impressed with how thoughtful it was. And I'm sure that folks would come back, and I know would come back and look at this discussion and look at how thoughtful it is. And so, hopefully just these discussions in and of themselves are change-making events. So with that said, thank you, everybody. That is kind of the final item of the agenda tonight. And we move into closing statements from everybody. Things that are exciting, things that are happening in the neighborhood, things that you would like to highlight. So I apologize, Katie, but you are first. You can always pass too.
I love the snow. I love snow activities. Yesterday's snow was so floofy and it was like the most perfect, snowflake snow. So I am a person who is not sad that winter is here.
I think I am next. I recently made a purchase of like those solar LED twinkle lights. I think I bought 18 of them, and I'm planning on putting some up in front of our house and on some boulevard trees, which may or may not be okay, but we'll see how it works to kind of light up Grand Avenue a little bit. We've been seeing so many more people, at least I have been seeing a lot more people walking on Grand, which is exciting with some of the redevelopment stuff. So if you walk on Grand, I tried to go do it last night and it was very cold, so I only got one done, but give me a week and hopefully there'll be some twinkles on the 4400 block of Grand. Alice, you're up next.
Just being in the holiday season, I think just makes us all remember and appreciate our neighbors and our friends and our family. So this is a great season, and it's great to see everybody out and lighting up Kingfield and doing some fun activities. I'm hoping to get over to Butter this week and make some luminaries. That'll be fun. So there's been too little fun and we need more fun.
Thanks, Alice. Josh, you're up next. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm excited for the holidays, of course. Good to see, be good to see family and everything then. I just got my booster shot yesterday, so I'm extra vaxxed in time for holiday gatherings. I don't know, nothing else comes to mind.
Awesome, thanks. Jerome, you're up.
Let's see. I'm excited about my 90-day COVID immunity window after having recovered over the past couple of weeks. And I'm really excited about my block. I think since the last time we spoke, my block has like gotten together a few times to like discuss like books that we've read written by people on the block, to talk about like ballot stuff, to talk about issues in the community, and even talking about safety during the rash of sort of like vehicular crimes happening around us. I've just been a really healthy set of conversations and real sense of community in the 3900 block of Pleasant Avenue over the last couple months, and I really appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerome. David R.
Yeah, things have been good for me. I'm just looking forward to the lakes freezing so I can get out and play some pond hockey, which I always love doing. So yeah, feels like winter now, not next week, yes, but yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, David. David S.
Yeah, I'll echo everyone's thoughts of those who are excited for snow. It's been great. And then I'm also kind of excited as we went through the events calendar, just hoping for a 2022 with some in-person events happening. So fingers crossed for that.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Todd.
I don't know if I'm excited or disappointed about if the reality that this may be global warming, but if winter's really a month shorter, I have a hard time arguing with it. And it feels good. So I'm glad we're at this point, but waiting for the equinox, and let's get on with it.
Awesome. Thanks, Todd. BJ.
I will be buying my cross-country ski pass for the year after this meeting. So excited to be back out cross-country skiing. And myself and 3 other neighbors braved the cold and stood out with Light Up Kingfield on Monday. It was chilly, but we were out there and looking forward to 37, I think, on this next Monday. It'll be much warmer to be out in the neighborhood.
Awesome. Thanks, BJ. Sarah T.
My neighbors and I also braved the cold on Monday night. I thought for sure nobody was going to be out, but we had a huge crew. I think we had 3 bonfires on the block. We had the caroling group spend quite a bit of time. My neighbor who's lived on the block for 60 some years had his 89th birthday, and all his kids that grew up in the house were there. And were telling us stories about playing in our houses as kids and stuff like that. So we had free hot cocoa with a container that I borrowed from KFNA, which I need to ask about borrowing for the rest of the month to keep doing that. So yeah, it was good. We want to try to roast some hot dogs next week, and we updated block contact lists with emails and more phone numbers. And so yeah, it was just a really, really nice evening.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Kenzie, are you good going?
Yeah, I'm also very, very excited for the snow. Yeah, this past weekend I was doing all the wintry activities. I did the red undie run, which was super fun, super funny. It was very cold. And yeah, work has been just super fun these past few weeks, a lot of events. It's been great meeting more and more people from the community. And I'm excited to eat a lot of cookies on Saturday. Please sign up. Come eat cookies with me.
Awesome. Thanks, Kenzie. And Sarah, LR.
So thank you all for your engagement in the neighborhood, but at this point, I have to say that the all-star in the neighborhood to me right now is Dan Swenson-Klatt, who never says no to anything, including letting a whole bunch of people take over his kitchen for empty bowls, which is going to be like so much fun. So I'm super excited for it.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. And ditto on the props to Dan for that and the community stuff and everything that Dan has done over a long time here in the neighborhood. So yeah, thanks to Dan. So that is, I don't think I missed anybody. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for the engagement again. Thank you for the discussion. Hopefully out of our committees, more engagement and more commitments around events coming up this year. We'll see you all hopefully at an event coming up, at least in the next couple of weeks. So thanks again, everybody. Have a good night.
Sounds good. Take care, everyone.